Hi guys, welcome to In Case You Missed It for May 28th, 2022. This is a new weekly news rundown with all the headlines of the week that I think are important and wanted to show to you. All the sources are in the description. Make sure that you subscribe, give a thumbs up, it really helps the channel out. And let's get right into it. So we're going to start in Buffalo, where there's new events that have come out implicating a former federal agent who's being investigated as an accomplice to the shooting. Apparently, this individual had participated in conversations in chat rooms and seemed to be a sort of a mentor to the shooter, even going so far as to join him in a Discord call for discussion of the target and the plans for the shooting a full 30 minutes prior to the shooting itself. Despite this foreknowledge, this agent neglected to call law enforcement and let anyone know what was about to happen, and he's now being investigated by the FBI. To those of us that remember the whole Gretchen Whitmer plot, this kind of glows to high heaven, and there is zero trust in anyone associated with the federal government to do the right thing here. Of course, I'm not outright saying that this is a false flag operation, but I am saying that there's something disgusting about the feds having their fingerprints on these types of events that continuously occur, especially with all of the talk of the Great Reset that's been going around for the past 2 years. There is something particularly disturbing about how quick people are to point at gun laws and gun control measures, and they say things like ban assault rifles and implement background checks, when one, these measures are already in place, so what is the point? And two, there is an absolute refusal on the part of politicians, activists, and people in general to discuss the impact of lockdown, social media, clout chasing in society, and everything else that goes on with the motivations of these mass shooters. Moving on to the second enormous tragedy of the month, this one was the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas from Tuesday. So many videos and details are coming out proving that the police response was beyond inadequate. It was downright despicable and evil. Police officers engaged the gunman and then ran and hid when he fired back, allowing him to barricade himself in a room, murder 19 children and 2 teachers, and have nothing happen for about 90 minutes. Meanwhile, the cops entered the building to rescue their own children, refusing to do anything for nearly an hour and a half. Further stories report a slew of miscues on the part of law enforcement and the school itself, including the gunman being allowed to enter through a door that was propped open by a teacher. Oh, but it gets so much worse. Videos and testimonies have emerged from parents and onlookers who screamed and cursed at the police for their inaction. As children were brutally murdered by the psychopath inside the school, police instead focused their efforts on crowd control measures against the parents who were gathered outside. Police went so far as to tackle, handcuff, pepper spray, and even tase parents who attempted to go inside to save their children. In one horrific display of brutality, the Uvalde Police allegedly tased a father who was going to a bus to retrieve his child after the threat was neutralized. Beyond this, the police actually deterred and held back the officers who finally stopped and killed the gunman. These stories have sparked so much outrage that there have been just dozens of calls by high-profile politicians and activists for an FBI investigation of the police response. Inadequate, cowardly, and downright disgusting. Another headline that surprised absolutely nobody, an organized religion has been exposed once again to be full of sexual abuse. That's right, the Southern Baptist Convention released a secret list this week that included over 200 pages of names of church officials and affiliates who had sexually abused and molested their flock. In a brutal, nearly 300-page report, the leaders of the SBC, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., are accused of stonewalling survivors of sexual abuse by the pastors and church officials, prioritizing the protection of the reputation of the church and its officials over the safety of the victims. Guidepost Solutions, the independent firm that published the report, found that leaders were singularly focused on avoiding liability for the SBC. When the hell are people going to understand that giving other humans power over their life is a bad idea? Political or religious, it doesn't really matter. Look, if you're religious, you should be avoiding these parasites that call themselves humans and claim to speak in the name of God. How many children have to be abused and raped and the whole affair covered up before people are going to stop funding and worshiping at the feet of these disgusting demagogues. With the Catholic Church and the SBC, the two largest Christian organizations in the country have now been exposed as deeply disgusting dens of degenerate demons who use their positions of power to wreak havoc on their parishioners and their children. To hell with all of them. Switching gears to international news, a spokesman of the World Economic Forum wants you to know that by 2030, smartphones will likely be built into your body.
I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
I don't know about you, but I have no desire to allow oligarchs to implant any kind of technology in my body. Metaverse is bad enough, but a built-in smartphone is pretty disturbing. It reminds me of that episode of South Park where Cartman and Alec Baldwin have antenna built into their head so that they can just upload their thoughts to the internet. Speaking of evil lizard people, J. Michael Evans, the president of Alibaba, is pleased to be developing individualized carbon footprint tracking. In his own words,
"We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint." What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Jesus. I, for one, will not be signing up for this service, assuming I'm given a choice. Although I can't imagine that they'll leave it up to us once they have this technology available to them if they get their way. I'm sure you've been asking yourself, is the next round of lockdowns about to start? Well, in some European countries, yeah. As of Sunday, several countries in the EU, led by Belgium, began instituting state-mandated lockdowns for monkeypox, an extremely rare virus that's endemic to the Congo. Over 200 cases have now been reported worldwide, and several experts are concerned that the virus is being transmitted sexually between gay and bisexual men. Although authorities have assured us that this is definitely not the case, leading experts in virology are warning that this is indeed the case and recommend extra precautions for men who have sex with other men, citing the fact that the majority of cases in the UK have been among men who have sex with other men, which is a serious overrepresentation of that group. This is weirdly reminiscent of the AIDS epidemic, where the denial, due to fear of discrimination, led to many gay men not taking appropriate precautions or getting the help that they needed. The U.S. has responded to the spread of the virus by purchasing 13 million doses of freeze-dried monkeypox vaccine, in addition to the 30 million that they bought in, back in 2019, before the FDA had actually approved the use of the jab. Moving on, not much has changed on the Ukraine front, other than further retreating by Ukraine in the east, as Russia slowly but surely grinds down the Ukrainian army and gains ground. Despite enormous amounts of money and supplies being poured into Ukraine by NATO, Russia is now pushing back the Ukraine offensive that sent them reeling and caused people to speculate that Ukraine might actually win the war. Predictably, the mainstream media has been mostly silent on the topic of Ukraine this week, despite it dominating the headlines for the previous months. Putin says he is open to peace talks, but the West must stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. Maybe one day we'll finally know what's really going on over there, but the media silence since Ukraine transitioned from plucky underdog to slowly being crushed is pretty deafening. Speaking of Ukraine, let's jump to Australian news, the outlet news.au, where they praise the bravery of an Australian dad who was killed fighting as a volunteer in Ukraine, labeling what he did as humanitarian aid. Let's cut the crap here. This is not humanitarian aid. This is brainwashing by the media and the government that's encouraging people who only want to help to go fight in a war that is not theirs. This man has a family that needed him at home, that needs him. He had a place in society. He was pushed and manipulated until he felt as though it was his duty to go fight Russia. This guy willingly became a fighter in NATO's proxy war. Now, yes, Russia is the aggressor, but they were not unprovoked, and the provocation that Ukraine engaged in was fully backed by the US and NATO. In my opinion, because NATO wanted a proxy war to alleviate any hint of a threat that Russia may have pretended to pose, and to engage and weaken a Chinese ally. Russia's actions have been reprehensible, But I will continue to point out the fact that Ukraine is not innocent. They've killed civilians. They've castrated prisoners of war. They do not deserve the lives of Western fathers who have families that desperately need them back home. Particularly when we see such a rash of young men who grow up without fathers and turn out to go, I don't know, shoot up elementary schools. We need those people in our countries doing their job. Ah, yes, and talking about Russia reminds me of Russiagate. And look at that. The Clinton-Russiagate trial has gone to deliberation. Matt Taibbi's new article on Substack breaks the story that there is now evidence that the great lizardess Godzilla herself personally approved the misinformation that haunts Trump to this day, specifically Russiagate. Why is this not front page news across the board? Well, obviously because it exonerates Trump of the whole Russiagate lie and forces the admission that he won fairly over Clinton. But beyond that, the Russian collusion narrative was heavily pushed by almost every media organization in some capacity. In fact, according to Taibbi, there are two huge reasons why this story is not bigger. First of all, admitting what happened would require acknowledgement by the FBI, the CIA, and every major news media agency in the U.S. That, hey, this actually happened. Additionally, and far worse for the left and the Democrats, they would have to admit that they used their connections in government and media to smear and generate criminal investigations of their political rivals, which is something that we associate with evil dictators. Maybe this is what they aspire to be. This particular group of Democrats seems to be walking in that direction. Elon Musk was majorly displeased this week when he realized that Bill Gates was funding smears against him. But who would not have guessed that, right? I know that there's some that call Elon controlled opposition and they assert that he's not our ally in this fight against the elites. But to me, this seems to stack up as evidence to the contrary. Bill Gates is well known for his shady business dealings and connections to groups like the World Economic Forum, and his outspoken stances supporting the far left are a matter of common knowledge. Elon Musk is no saint, but I think that overall he's a force for good, particularly since the war for Twitter began. On the culture news, feminists and lefties are very salty that the BBC has said J.K. Rowling's views on trans people are actually popular and cannot be categorized as unpopular. Of course, they're telling themselves, and you, that everyone agrees with them, but at the same time, they're oppressed minorities who are facing attacks from all sides. Both of these things cannot be true at the same time, but did that deter opponents of Rowling from protesting with signs that said trans witches are witches? Of course not. Because literally everyone obviously cares about what J.K. Rowling thinks, right? Right? And finishing up, we're going to head back to Australia, where the media is urging people to engage in non-monogamous relationships, going so far as to provide instructions as to how you should go about bringing another person in. They claim that 78% of people in non-monogamous relationships are happy and fulfilled, whereas only 28% of people in monogamous relationships are happy. They glamorize non-monogamy and cite shining examples of successful relationships like this. For example, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett, as they're clearly extraordinarily happy with the state of their relationship. This push toward the violation of traditional values is disturbing enough, but the fact that they have the gall to publish a story about how to introduce another party into a relationship is kind of disgusting. People don't understand relationships and how this works, and they look for fulfillment in the arms of another person instead of working on themselves and trying to establish a connection with a partner who will challenge them and make them better. Your relationship is not and should not be what fulfills your life. You must find fulfillment elsewhere, but you allow your partner in to support you and challenge you, and you do the same for them. You call them out on their nonsense. It's not just an opinion, this is what the clinical psychology literature bears out. The assault on traditional morality and the promotion of hookup culture is very worrying. That's all for this week. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Please share the video. Check out the links in the description to join my Subscribe Star for exclusive pre- and post-show clips and more. Jump in on the live streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 Eastern. Check out the merch store. Get yourself a Benjamin shirt or mug. And let me know what you think of this segment in the comments below. And I'll see you next time.